Welcome to the 2022 BIPOC Perioperative Leaders to Know. My name is Carissa Brewster, staff writer for Whitman Partners, and today we welcome Prisca Duclos, Assistant Director of Surgery at Memorial Regional Hospital in Hollywood, Florida. Welcome, Prisca.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. This is really an honor. That's the word.
You are so welcome. So my first question is, what drew you to perioperative services?
You know, it's really funny because in nursing school, I thought that I was going to be a midwife. Like everybody knew I was going to work in L&D. My first experience in an OR, I actually passed out. I remember in my last semester of nursing school, I kid you not, I asked this GYN surgeon, I said, please, 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 I want to go into the OR. I want to see your case. I won't touch anything. And he was like, well, let me hold the pen so I could sign consent. And he said, no problem. So I went in, and then the nurse that was working with him, she wasn't like the most pleasant person. She was kind of like, just stand over there and don't touch anything blue. And I remember being so excited, but once the lights went on in the OR, I just started to get really hot. Like I could feel that I was sweating. And I decided, I said, well, let me step outside because I didn't want to go down in the room because I felt myself going down. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pass out. It's really hot in here. So I never thought I would end up in the OR. My clinical instructor actually found me and I ended up in the ER, long story. So never imagined that I would ever end up in the operating room area. But then I applied into a couple of positions for L&D that didn't work out. And I was working on the floor at the time. And one of my colleagues, she said, you know, they're opening up a residency program for the OR. Why don't you just give it a shot? And I was like, well, let's do it. Hopefully I don't pass out this time around. And that's just how it began. And, you know, looking back, I'm so happy that I didn't end up in the L&D area because I just love surgery. It just does something to me that no other aspect of nursing does.
Awesome. How has the COVID pandemic impacted your approach to leadership?
I think with COVID, it's forced us as leaders not to only see our employees as the person that provides a service here, but to really consider as our employees as the holistic. So what they have going on outside of the work environment as well. Because when you're able to make that touch, then you're really able to get people to buy in to whatever vision that you have and get the work done. I think prior to COVID, it was more like, oh, we're looking at the metrics, we're doing this. But sometimes people didn't always make time to say, you know, how are you doing? Like, how do you feel? Are you okay today? And I think COVID kind of has forced that upon us as leadership.
Totally. Have you ever experienced any discrimination in your career or witnessed something that you can speak on, and how is it handled?
So I actually had two issues on the same day that I'll share. So it was like back to back. And I remember I was working for a prior organization prior to Memorial Regional. And I was the director of surgery there. And I was called to administration to come meet a new surgeon. So I grabbed my SPD supervisor and I said, hey, we got to go meet this new doc, etc. So we ran up to administration. And when I got there, the surgeon, you know, my CNO introduced herself. She was like, I'm so-and-so. The surgeon shook her hand. They even kind of gave each other a hug. The business recruiter, business development personnel / recruiter, she introduced herself and the surgeon kind of shook her hand as well. So I was next. So I followed suit and I was like, hi, my name is Prisca Duclos. I'm your OR director. And I went to shake her hand and she said, oh no, we don't do that. And she fist pumped me. And she tried to make it seem like it was because of COVID. But if it was because of COVID, you just hugged my CNO. You just hugged the business developer / physician recruiter. It was not an issue. They were both of the same ethnic group as you. But when it got to me, you're like, no, we don't do that. Fist bump. And then my SPD manager, who was right behind me, she was like, hi. Because she didn't even know like how to react at that moment. she didn't want to, embarrass herself by trying to extend the handshake, and, that wasn't reciprocated. So when I walked away, the SPD supervisor looked at me and she was like, oh my gosh, did she like not want to shake our hands? And I was like, child, don't worry about that. We'll be okay. And it even, exemplified what she was doing. Like, it put it so much on the forefront, because by the time we got back to the OR, I introduced the surgeon to my nurse manager, who was also the same group as my CNO, etc. And she actually shook his hand as well. So it was just myself. So, in the moment, it's almost like, oh my gosh, that's a slap in my face. And then later on that day, I had security called me and they're like, there's a vendor here to see you. I said, send the vendor up. And then when he arrives, he's like, I'm looking for a Priscilla. And I said, no, I think you're looking for Prisca. And he said, no, I'm looking for Priscilla. And I said, well, can I help you? And he was just kind of like moving me to the side. No, I'm looking for Priscilla, the OR director. So I looked at him, I said, this is Prisca, the OR director. I'm the person you're looking for. And immediately you could see like the discomfort in his face, like, oh, and I said, well, you know what? We don't have an appointment for today. So let's regroup on another day, because today is kind of busy. So let me add you to my calendar and we'll go from there. But when situations like that occur, it's almost like, my gosh, we've made so much progress. And then it feels like you're going back. And I think what affects you even more is, if you're working for an organization where the leadership, doesn't call that out. Because I thought, my thinking would be, if that would happen to one of my employees, and I was there, I could have redirected the situation. But my leadership at that time, my CNO did not, she just went on. And then afterwards, she came to me and she was like, oh, don't worry about what happened. So she saw it too. But she waited till after the surgeon left, etc., and she kind of downplayed the whole scenario.
So my next question is, how can staff, executive search firms like us, and talent acquisition professionals, what do you think they can do to kind of promote and encourage diversity and equity and inclusion in perioperative leadership roles?
I think the first thing to do is to tag into the nursing schools, because, we go to nursing school, but I don't know for others, but for me, there's a lot of professional growth opportunities in nursing that I was not aware of. When I was in school, I was kind of like under the impression, like, you become a nurse, you become a charge nurse, you might be the director, but I never thought about, all the different roles, like VP of operations, like none of those things are really exposed to me. So when there's a lack of exposure, you don't know the opportunities that you have as a diverse individual. So I think tagging in to the local nursing schools and like their fairs and everything like that will give us some more exposure. And I think LinkedIn is also a great asset, because you're able to search and see who's in these different positions at different institutions, and use that as a tool as well.
That kind of ties into my next question about, like, what is your advice for a BIPOC professional that aspires to lead periop?
I think they should walk into every door that's open for them. Looking back at my professional journey, every opportunity that came, regardless of what it was, the door opened and I was like, yeah, I can do it. I'll figure it out. So I think when you have that attitude where, yeah, I'll figure it out, like, hey, yeah, choose me, it just opens so many more avenues. Whereas some people are like, oh no, I don't have the training. You don't have the training, but you can learn and you can find someone who does have the training. So don't limit yourself. Instead, embrace everything that's thrown on you. In life, we never lose. It's either you win or you learn the lesson that prepares you for the next phase.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. So did you have a mentor coming up, and kind of what, like, kind of 3 key areas you think a mentor should cover with their mentee in periop?
I don't really could really say that I've had like a mentor. Coming up, I've looked at different individuals that I kind of admire. So, coming out of nursing school, I had my first DON was an African-American woman, and there were certain things about her that was like, oh, wow, yeah, I like that. So I would take little nuggets from there. Then, as I continued my journey, there would be like someone else that, oh my gosh, yeah, I really like, what she does. I remember when I joined Memorial's team for the first time, at our orientation, the CNO came to speak to us. And that was the really first time that I really had an insight as to like what exactly the CNO does. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, this CNO is, I like what she does. I like her attitude, you know. So I took a little bit of nuggets from her. So I think in life, there's not really, we don't really have one mentor. Some people say they do, but I like to say that I have like a variety because everyone has something that I can grab and learn and make my own. But as a mentee and a mentor relationship, I think being relatable is the first key. You know, don't make it seem like to your mentee that, you know, your professional growth was all flowers. You know, be real. Tell them the ugly things that you've encountered, like the things that have made you cry that you learned a lesson from, because by doing so, you are, you know, you're avoiding them from making the same mistake. Or if they do find themselves in a similar situation, they know how to navigate. So being real, I think another opportunity is finance. Um, I don't think finance and leadership is really taught as much as it should be taught. You know, as you grow in the OR, you learn supplies and making sure preference cards are okay. But as you get into the leader role where you're having to, you know, analyze your FTEs versus productivity, etc., that's something that, you know, you kind of struggle with, or you have to tap into your finance department, etc. So I think leaning into the financial aspect is important. And then I think the last thing is to have balance. As OR leaders, it's like it's 24/7. It does not stop, you know, but there has to be some type of balance in teaching your mentee that it's okay to say, no, I can't do this right now. I'll take a look at it tomorrow, or, you know, give me an hour to decompress. And I think that's so important as women of color too, because as women of color, I feel as though we almost push ourselves over because it's like, I want to show up and show them that I belong here. Whereas other individuals, they'll take their PL or they'll take 30 minutes for lunch, you know, but we were consistently on the grow because we want to prove ourselves. And that just ends up being, you know, a case of burnout. So you don't want to burn yourself out.
That's such a good point about not being in this mode of constantly thinking someone's watching you and you got to prove yourself. I mean, some people are watching you, but you can't let it like control you.
Yes.
You know. Yeah. Um, speak tying this into like leadership, BIPOC, like aspirate people that aspire to leadership. A lot of the politics from our country last several years plus COVID has started to kind of leak into like the workplace, you know. And so what are your thoughts and what is your advice on kind of how to handle that with grace when somebody basically kind of steps out of line at work, essentially?
So I think emotional intelligence is important because we have a lot of smart people that work with us, but there's no emotional intelligence whatsoever. Like they're just not in tune with the reality. So I think, you know, as leaders, it's very important to tap into emotional intelligence. And then from emotional intelligence, you're able to relate more to certain groups. I think if your organization offers different, you know, diversity courses, I think that's something that leadership should show, you know, set the standard by example. So you take the courses, you encourage your staff to take the courses. I also think in celebrating the different you know, heritages. So like the different people in your department, they all have a month. Like September is Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm Haitian, you know, by background, and May is like Haitian Heritage. Haitian Flag Day is in May. So I think celebrating those different things, you know, doing different team building exercises with potlucks, and you're able to, because all of those things, they bring awareness to different things. So although we're starting to see all of these things leak into the workforce, but you can actually, you know, tag them in a positive light instead of what we see on television or on social media.
What are some ways that you think the industry can address the pipeline, the of to nursing to address the shortage that we've been experiencing even before COVID, but obviously COVID made that worse. What are your thoughts on that?
So I want to tag and give kudos though to Memorial and what Memorial is doing because I'm going to brag on my organization a little bit here. I'm really, really proud of a lot of the initiatives that Memorial has set out to do. But one of the things that I'm really proud of is their pipeline for new residents. Because with the new resident pipeline, they also give new residents the opportunity to come straight into the OR. You know, some facilities, they say, hey, no, you got to go on the floor. You have to do this before coming into peri-op. But they actually expose them to that. Not only are they doing that with new residents, but we also have a fellowship program. So if you were a nurse in any other area, if you decide, hey, I want to do a specialty now, it gives you the opportunity to not leave the organization, but to transfer and to learn within the organization. And what they're doing is they're not only looking at, you know, the OR or ICU, but they're tagging into a lot of the specialties in nursing that people don't give consideration to, like infection control and quality, education. So they're really pushing. So as we grow from the outside, but we're pushing the people from within to continue growing. So then it just, you know, fulfills the circle. It's like a circle. So you keep on filling all of your areas. So I think that's such a great thing that Memorial is doing. And Memorial has partnered with a lot of our community colleges and universities as well. We offer scholarships. So they're really making their presence known in the community. So by the time someone graduates from nursing school, it's like, hey, I want to be a part of Memorial.
That is very smart of your organization, and it helps the industry, you know, win-win. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, this was truly an honor and a pleasure. And I hope people who listen, they learned something.